Assalamu alaikum, guys. Welcome back to Shifa'a. We are hosting a special guest today.
Introduce yourself.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Judy.
And today's episode is about Islamic school, and thankfully Judy has also gone to Islamic school with us, so we have a lot to talk about.
A lot to unpack today, guys.
We're going to be talking about our experiences, where we went, and so much more.
I had went to Islamic school from grade 6 to 8.
Me as well.
But I went to only from 7 to 8.
So we did go for kind of, I would say like these are like majorly developmental years, because it's kind of like where you figure out who you are, right? Kind of like start building the basis of your identity. I know that I went because I remember like being in grade 5 and I'd hear stories about like all these middle schoolers and I was scared, and so I was like, Mama, please put me in Islamic school. I'm so scared of public school. Like it was just like I was scared of it almost. I don't even know why. And so she was like, okay. And then she also put my younger sister into it.
I think I went because they were bringing out a new like sex ed curriculum that was just very too intricate for middle schoolers to learn. And I remember just the Muslim community in our area at that time, like when we were going into grade 6, they all kind of protested against it, and our mayor was like, no, it's still gonna be implemented. So my mom was like, okay, we're just gonna put you in Islamic school because you don't need to be knowing the things that they teach you. Obviously, you're supposed to learn about sexual education, but like not in the way that they were teaching us in public school, because it was just too much. What about you, Judy?
I never had the full talk of like why I'm with my parents of like why I was sent to Islamic school, but if I were to like break it down into like, there's definitely so many reasons, because I came pretty old like to Canada from back home, and my parents were very against like everything in public school. They just, because I don't know if anyone Arab is watching it, like as Janib, that's like she didn't like the way they were teaching children anything, the culture, and yes, it could be the sex ed thing, like Ayat's parents being against it, but then again, like I didn't speak to my parents about it, so they didn't tell me, and then they were basically deciding for me too that like I should just go to Islamic school, and that was basically it. Like there was no like big reason behind it. It was just a decision that they made out of nowhere.
I think it's because like our parents coming from back home were also very scared putting us in schools in general, because it's such a different culture, and they hadn't gone to school here, so they didn't really know what like being in a Canadian school was like, and I guess they just like thought of it as the worst, or like thought like, okay, we don't know how our kids are going to react to this, how our kids are going to be treated by like, them being different, so let's just send them to a school where they're going to be the same, I just think that could be like a fear that they went through, because there's obviously like we weren't bad kids and we were like sent off to Islamic school, like it wasn't like a punishment, but it was just kind of like, let's just be on the safe side,
But then again, there were parents that would send their kids to Islamic school as punishment, or as like, oh, I'm gonna put my kids in Islamic school just because I am not able to teach them the right ways of Islam. So
I knew a lot of people like that.
So I'm just gonna depend on the Islamic school that I'm sending my kids to teach them Islam.
It's like that like laziness in parenting. I feel like you're just lazy to teach your kids, so you're like, let me just let them learn the easy way, like just put them in a school where they're gonna have to learn about Islam. But it could cause the kid to go down so many different paths, and like being on the right path is not always like gonna be the result. So it's also a risk for you to just be lazy and just throw your kids in Islamic school, which is why I feel like if you do put your kid in Islamic school, it should be for implementation of Islam rather than education of Islam. Like to not teach your kid about Islam, but to just implement the culture or the rules and regulations of Islam, because that's what Islamic school was.
It's kind of like, these are the rules of our school. Like, oh, you need to wear hijab because it's uniform. Not you need to wear hijab because these are the rulings of it within Islam. This is how it's beneficial
Yeah.
to you. It's how it's beneficial to the community. It's kind of, this is what you need to do, and that's it. There's no reasoning behind it.
Mm-hmm. And that's why you need to come into Islamic school with like background knowledge about your religion first. Like you need to know how to pray, you need to know about the hijab, you need to know about interactions between guys and girls, because if you're just gonna go off it based off of like your school's rules, you're gonna have a negative connotation towards these rules in Islam for no reason.
And when it becomes something that's correlated to school rules, you don't implement it outside.
Yeah.
I feel like that was one thing that I really struggled with was, I have to pray because I'm in school. But then when I go home and be like, that's a school thing, I don't need to pray outside.
Yeah.
It was hard to kind of like make that divide of the two.
Because at home, people are not like going back to the parents that are sending their kids to Islamic school just because they want them to learn Islam rather than being taught of it at home. At home, it's not the same environment. So that's why it's not like, it's just like, it's a school thing for me to learn Islam, for me to be Muslim. That's why we have like friends or people that we know of that are not like as well educated on Islam as they should be, and the outcome of like them being at sent to Islamic school was never like it wasn't always good.
Yeah. And it also like, I feel like if your kid is not taught Islam and then you're sending them to an Islamic school, it's causing that same environment as a public school, because this kid is coming in with like the Western culture, the Western ideology, the Western like raising, and then you're putting them in Islamic school where the culture is different than their household, and then you're expecting them to like follow those rules and whatever, and then when the kid turns out to like rebel. And, like, I remember we had so many girls in our class that did not wear hijab outside of school. So let's say they did not, like, during recess or something, they would take it off. Or, like, when we went to school field trips, they would take it off. There was this big, like, backlash against them. Like, how could you do this? You're such a bad kid. But it's like, you need to teach your child before bringing them to Islamic school about these things so that they're not labeled as the bad kid for not following Islamic rules.
And with the education thing, I feel like one thing that Islamic school kind of struggles with is applying a curriculum to Islam, right? Kind of like building it into grade levels, because every student comes with a different background. And so it's kind of like, you should know this already because you're 12, you're 11 years old. You should know this already, so we're not going to even bother going over that or teaching you that because you should already know. Right? That I feel like that's one thing that I really struggled with, was going into like Islamic studies and they'd be like, like this, and I'd be like, well, what is that? Yeah. I don't know about the entire history of the Prophet ﷺ, right? And then they just kind of like talk about it as if I had already known.
Yeah.
And then when you ask questions, they'd be like, well, you should already know, right? I feel dumb asking questions, and so I just refrain from asking questions onwards.
Yeah.
Or even with, like, we had Quran as one of our subjects. Like, we had a lower level and a higher level, but it was not, like, based on skill. It was based on whether you spoke Arabic at home or not.
I know exactly what you mean.
There would be, like, brown girls or Somali girls that were in the lower level just because they didn't speak Arabic, but they knew how to recite better than some of the girls that spoke Arabic at home. Like, it should be based on skill. Like, if you're an Arab girl and you don't speak Arabic that well, you should be put in the lower level. What's wrong with being in the lower level and learning in the lower level? And vice versa. But for them, it was just like, you speak Arabic at home, you're put in this level. You don't, you put in this level.
It's not like it's still Quran.
Yeah.
Whether or not you're in the lower level or not.
And I bet girls came into the school not even knowing how to like read, and it would have been so embarrassing for them to like be put into a grade where you're expected to memorize and you don't even know how to read yet. Like that's where Khadija was talking about, like learning how to start from the beginning, learning how to read first, learning how to just practice reading through surahs before learning how to memorize. Because you can't just be expected to know that unless your parents are teaching. Because there are parents that don't teach their kids about Islam at home.
There's a lot of things I feel like I didn't learn in Islamic school that I should have. Like, I know me and Judy were talking about how we never learned how to do ghusl in Islamic school, right? The content of, like, sexual education and puberty was all very, like, under hush. You know, like, you don't talk about it, right? They'd kind of, like, refer to it, be like, I remember one time our teacher was like, you have to do ghusl after your period and after other things. And then we'd be like, oh, well, what are other things? Because we had, like, zero clue. She'd be like, you don't really need to know about that. At that point, we were in grade 8, about to go into high school. I feel like at that point, you should know. They're just like, that's something that you don't talk about. There's so many things in Islamic school that they just kind of, like, expect you to know. But where am I supposed to know if school is the one place I'm supposed to learn about these things, especially in Islamic school? Yeah. And if I'm not learning it there, then where am I supposed to learn it from?
And then, like, I don't know if it was for, like, everyone else that experienced this, but I remember when they were first teaching us about how to take care of, like, dealing with our period or menstruation, like, they were teaching it, like, in a way where it was, like, a thing to be ashamed of. Like, like, I remember when they were telling us how to, like, especially if we have boys in the house, like, brothers or a dad, and, like, we share a bathroom or something, that the way we rolled our pads had to be, like, in a specific way where it was hidden. And then, like if it was Ramadan, you weren't allowed to eat in front of your parents, or your brothers or, like, your dad. Like, being on your period is a thing to be ashamed of, and that's what they made me think of. Like, that's literally what I was embarrassed to be on my period.
I remember, this is, like, me and Judy went to the same Islamic school, and obviously this is wrong. Like, I'm not going to say that this is right, but, like, girls would not roll up their pads correctly in the bathroom, and the poor janitor would have to, like, clean up people's blood every time she went in there and cleaned. And you know what? Our male vice principal had a whole meeting with every single girl, and, like, he had us all in the gym, and he literally told us that if we don't roll up our pads properly next time, he is going to run tests on the blood to find out whose blood it is, and then he's going to suspend them. And obviously he wasn't going to do that, but for number one, a guy to be talking to us about our periods is embarrassing. Like, you should not be talking to us about that because you are the male vice principal, and we had a female principal, so she fully could have come and talked to us about it. And number two, you can't instill behavior through punishment or through fear. Like, that's embarrassing as hell for somebody to say, like, I'm gonna run tests. Also, what does that mean? You're not gonna send my pad to, like, some scientific lab. Like, don't lie.
No way.
But even with Khadija, what she was saying about, like, it being on the hush hush or, like, low, like, if you don't know, if you don't know, then you're too young to know. I remember we were being taught the story of Prophet Yusuf, and the word in the Islamic school, like, in the Islamic textbook, was seduce. And the Islamic studies teacher that we had at that time, she was still, like, she taught younger grades, but she was teaching us for some reason at that time. And she had told us, she was like, and then, you know, the wife tried to seduce Yusuf. And if you don't know what the word seduce means, then you're too young to know. And most of us in that class did not know what that word meant, but we were like, so how are we supposed to understand the story properly if you're not going to even tell us what that means? Like, you're just going to be like, oh, you're just too young to know. So how are we going to learn it then?
I feel like that's where the cultural and Islamic divide is very unclear for a lot of teachers, right? And the lack of professionalism within Islamic schools is actually outrageous, because a lot of these teachers either come from back home and need a job, so they feel that Islamic school is the best place, where they also implement, like, I guess, like, their back home mentalities, right? Or it's teachers kind of looking for that stepping stone to get experience and then go into school boards.
Yeah, so they're just experimenting on us.
That's literally what we are. We're just experiments.
Or, like, I think they also took advantage of the fact that we were all cultured students. Yeah. So they were, like, they felt more, like, if they were sent to, like, if one of the teachers that, like, were unprofessional were sent to a public school, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't act the same way they were acting in the Islamic school that they are in currently. Like, the way they were unprofessional, it seemed like it was obvious that they were just comfortable with us to be unprofessional, just because, like, oh, we were from the same background, or we're both Muslim. Like,
I feel like it was a good and bad thing, because it was a bad thing because we've had teachers call us, like, brats and stupid and stuff. Like, that's not something you tell kids, especially your students. Like, you just don't say that, and especially in a school setting. But then at the same time, it felt like all these teachers were, like, our aunts. Like, we also felt really comfortable with them because they kind of understood us in a way that, like, Islamic school,
there's a good side to it. There's also, like, there's always a good, like,
I guess there's, like, what you're trying to say is there's, like, a mutual understanding, right?
Yeah.
Of comfort. Like, you see this person like you would see your mom. Like, you could go and talk to them about things that they would actually understand because they're from the same culture. But at the same time, it's too unprofessional for them to be your teacher. Like, I get that in a guidance counselor kind of form. Like, for the guidance counselor to be Muslim and to, like, be cultured and an older lady or whatever from back home and she's living here, she's gonna understand your experiences better. But for your math or science teacher to like, you know, call you a brat just because you didn't do the homework, like it's unprofessional, and it doesn't help you learn better, if anything.
I feel like I actually felt the exact opposite. I never felt like these teachers were comfortable enough for me to go talk to like that, right? And I never felt like a real connection with them because I feel like it was constantly putting me down. Like, there would be times where there's this one teacher who would constantly tell me, this was in grade 8, and I had also known her since grade 7 because the teachers would just teach multiple grades at that point, right? And she would constantly tell me that I was just going to fail in high school, and I was just, like, constantly, every single day, just telling me that I was going to fail. And then I went to my brother because I look at him as, like, a fatherly figure, right? So I went to him, and I was like, oh, like, my teacher keeps telling me that I'm going to fail in high school. And he was in high school at that point. And he was like, oh, well, it's harder to fail a class in high school than it is to pass a class because you have to do absolutely nothing to fail a class. And then the next day when she told me I was going to fail again, because I would usually stay quiet, right? And this time I rebutted, and I was like, oh, it's actually harder to fail a class. And then the next day I go to school, and the principal pulls me out of class and tells me that if I keep like doing this, keep acting the way I'm going to act, then I'm going to fail in high school and I'm never going to succeed, and that her daughter's in high school. It's just constantly like, I never felt like these teachers were actually there for me, right? And even like in grade 6, when I first started going to Islamic school, I had confided in a teacher because I was in class and there was a lot going on at home, and she could kind of like sense it, and she's like, oh, what's wrong? And so at first I brushed it off, but then she called me outside of class after, and I told her, and then she went and like told a bunch of other teachers and stuff, and then told the principal, and then I didn't know that she told everyone, right? So then this other teacher comes to me the next day, and she's like, oh, like, I heard there's a lot going on at home, like, if you need anything, like, let me know. And I was just confused because I was like, why did she tell you? I said that to the teacher. I was like, why did she tell you? I didn't tell her that she could tell you, right? Because I feel like coming from public school, I expected there to be this privacy, right? Because that's, like, I have told other teachers in public school about these issues, and there was always that privacy. But then when I went to Islamic school, she was like, oh, well, she told me because, like, we work together and stuff, and we both teach you. That's not an excuse.
I know you felt like she wanted to know just because she wanted to know, not because she cared about your not because she wanted to care about your well-being.
The way she like came to me, it was like she wanted to know for gossip. Or she didn't have that sincere tone to her voice at all. And that made me even more mad. And ever since then, I was just like, it was like, I can't trust these teachers. They aren't on my side.
Yeah. But then that's also where you got the like whole negative connotation to Islamic school, because they mix up culture and Islam just the way how we've been speaking about it this entire episode. But like from back home, you know, the gossiping techniques that teachers will go through, you can't gossip when you're out of school. Like, you're not sitting back home talking about so-and-so and your neighbor and whatever. These are kids. These are even if they're not kids, these are like adults or teenagers. You cannot be sitting in a school setting and talking about them like you're back home again. So for you to separate Islam and culture is so important, because now you have kids thinking, oh, in Islamic schools, like, they don't have any privacy and they just tell everybody my life. That means that's exactly what Islam is. You're not supposed to have privacy and everybody's supposed to know your business. But that's not what Islam is. They just don't know the boundary.
Because they tend to like mix in culture with Islam.
Yeah.
They don't see the difference between culture and Islam. I don't know, like, if we were to sit here and talk about our bad experiences in Islamic school, this would be a hella long podcast.
I mean,
long ass.
Like, for unprofessionalism, like, even, I'm just gonna talk, because we had our school in a warehouse. Like, and I understand that it's, like, this systemic, like, thing in Canada, because these private schools were not being funded by the government, so they were just trying to find any place to rent to have this Islamic school. Like, it could be a basement, a warehouse, like, it could be an office. We literally had a warehouse. Like, one of our doors
the same. Like, you leave the back and there's like trucks coming and stuff.
Like,
we weren't allowed to go outside the school by ourselves because there'd be trucks coming and going. Our field was just like concrete, and you could see. You had to be careful if your like soccer ball went over the fence and like into like the truck stop or whatever, right? Like, you had to, like, go and ask the other, like, the truck drivers to get your soccer
Yeah,
ball back
like,
for you.
that's what our neighboring, like, our neighboring was offices and, like, trucks, and that's literally what it was. And even our classrooms didn't have windows. Our gym was, like, just some random, like, garage. Like, it was that type of unprofessionalism. I'm not gonna blame Islamic schools for it, because I know that there's a lack of money and there's a lack of, like, resources, but at the same time, you can't create a school with no money. Like, if you're gonna invest in making an Islamic school, invest in it being an actual school, like proper classrooms, windows, playgrounds, fields, where kids can be kids and students. Otherwise, don't make an Islamic school. Like, you can't just, like, throw kids into an office and expect them to, like, come out normal.
Especially when it's a school, you kind of need to think about the aesthetic experience, right?
Yeah.
Because school should be, like, you're kind of fostering kids and you're fostering their creativity, right? So you need to be able to kind of provide that experience for them and provide, like, I guess, like, a vibrant environment. And when you're in a warehouse or an office building, you're completely lacking that.
But I also feel like the experience we had, because it was unprofessional, we experienced things that I guess in a way could be good. Like, we had a lot of control with the way that we chose to teach ourselves. Like, in our class specifically, we would create all the bulletin boards because the teachers would not. So that's something you don't do in public school, because, like, usually everything's just made for you, like the designs, the everything. But we had so much control over what we wanted our class to be. And, you know, we could just show up to school the next day with a bulletin board and put it up. Like, there was no issue with that happening, you know? Like, they were like, just do whatever you want, like, create the class how you like it. And I feel like that's something good that I would love to see even in public schools, for you to have that type of, like, creativity or that type of independence to just have a classroom that you want to study in, you know? I think that, like, there was a confusion between interactions between boys and girls and interactions between male teachers and female teachers. Like, in our school, we were separated, you know, boys and girls were separated, but we still had male teachers, and I would say that a lot of them were unprofessional in the way that they taught girls, especially developing girls. Like, they kind of treated us like we were, I don't know how to put this. They treated us like we were, you know, at risk of, like, getting boyfriends and taking off the hijab.
I know,
and, like,
exactly
rebelling.
what you mean.
Like, that's what we were at risk for some reason. And when male teachers would teach our class, like, they kind of taught us with that mentality that we were girls that were on edge because we were going through puberty. Like, this whole mindset that's so weird. But yeah, we had, like, a male teacher that, like, he didn't have haya, you know, like, if you know the word haya, like, is obviously so associated with how girls act, and we would have haya when he was in our class, but he wouldn't. Like, even just the way he would sit in our class, like, he sat with his legs wide open, and, like, he was wearing a thobe, so there'd be nothing underneath. And then he'd also just overshare about his life, even though it wasn't inappropriate. He would tell us things that we did not need to know. Like, he would tell us about, like, he would go through his camera roll and show us, and, like, he would give different girls nicknames and stuff. Like, I'm not saying that it was inappropriate, because that's not, like, inappropriate, but it's just
that line between, like,
It's
teacher and friend
business.
kind of,
yeah.
like,
and then there's
becomes
also
blurred.
It's also the line between male and female. Like, if you're coming into the class with that mindset that these girls are on edge and whatever, then why are you oversharing and sitting the way that you are and, like, giving special nicknames to girls? Like, it's just weird, and all of us did not appreciate it. Like, nobody liked that teacher, you know?
Well, because me and Ayat went to the same Islamic school, I know who she's talking about exactly. And the way this man was weird was crazy. Like, he one time was having a conversation about, like, khubaz, bread, right? And as a, like, I was in grade 7. I didn't know anything about shopping or anything like that. So I was just telling him where my parents shop at to get good bread, because he was just asking his students, like, where they get their bread from. And so I told him, and silly me, like, I went with my dad to get bread or something that like store sold a bunch of stuff, but like sold a bunch of stuff other than bread. But we went to get bread, and I saw him there, and it was a whole thing. Like, he made it it was a one-sided thing, but he acted like him and I had this, like, inside joke where I would see him, like, outside of school.
All the time. And if she didn't, like, in front of the whole class, he'd be like, Judy, you didn't show up at the store that day. Like, as if it was, like, their, like, link up or something.
Yeah.
Like,
so,
you were meant to
like,
be there.
it was just very weird the way he, like, okay, and then, like, same thing for, like, other male teachers, principals, like the way they applied their rules, like, or not their rules, like Islam rules on the students, especially female students, was so wrong. Because like there were like let's talk about like the students that came to Islamic school because they were supposed to learn Islam, right? Like the kids that were sent to Islamic school just so that they would learn Islam. Imagine if you had a bad experience with your like female or male teacher telling you to like fix your hijab, but like in a improper manner. Like they were like yelling at you to fix your hijab. I've seen that happen. I've had that happen to me. And because I was, alhamdulillah, I was taught properly about hijab. I already had a background like information about like Islam and the entire like hijab story. So I didn't care enough to like be bothered, let it affect me. But then imagine like if it was a girl that was just starting to wear the hijab,
that was just learning about Islam. People from our Islamic school that took off the hijab the minute they left it. Like they, you know, immediately took it off because they associated the hijab with that Islamic school. And so you're teaching it in such an improper manner that you're literally causing kids to rebel against Islam. Like
there were so many, like I once had a teacher telling me like I wasn't wearing the hijab outside of school when I was in Islamic school. So I one time came and my hijab was like messed up or something, and so this teacher came up to me and she took me to the side and she was like, you don't wear, like she asked me, she was like, you don't wear the hijab outside of school, do you? And I was like, no. And then she goes, well, I can see why your hijab is messed up. And then she helped me and she was very nice about it. Like she taught me the right way to fix my hijab and the right way to like prevent my hair from showing ever again. And that is like that proper. Like I'm pretty sure that didn't take much effort for her to do. That could have been like one way that principal that yelled at me once because my hair was showing, like one way he could have like fixed that issue was for him to like go and tell a female teacher to tell me nicely. Like there was so many ways that he could have avoided that. Not like now I have this thing against him, which I didn't have to have.
But like the fact that you remember that teacher telling you that means that it had an effect on you. Like she came and she talked to you in a proper manner and you remember it to this day, meaning like she actually left a small little mark on you.
Even though she did nothing.
Yeah, she just tried to help you. Like it probably took her 10 seconds to fix you. Like that was it, you know?
It's so where, like that sisterhood kind of comes into play.
That's why I appreciate Islamic school, because even though it was unprofessional for teachers to like, you know, I bet public school no teachers like buttoning up your shirt or like whatever, but that's where you kind of appreciate that because it's kind of
like a home.
Like you feel like home. You feel like this is like your auntie or your khala or whatever. Like you could kind of trust her to help you out, but then you also don't want your khala teaching you math because that like nobody learns that way.
That's there's a good side and there's a bad side.
A good side, bad side.
I feel like adding on to like what you said about like the interaction between male teachers and like female students, I feel like that also kind of goes into how like students are taught to interact between like the girls and the boys, right? Like I remember in grade 6, like we wouldn't sit separately, right? Like we would just kind of be in like our own little like desk groups, but then onwards it's like, oh, like you have to sit on complete opposite sides of the room, don't talk to each other, don't look at each other, like you guys won't work together. And it doesn't teach you the morals and how to, I guess, like effectively communicate and interact with someone of the opposite gender.
And then like all of us had left Islamic school by grade 8, so grade 9, like high school, we were starting in public school, so that culture shock from sitting with just girls to like having a guy sitting at your table or a guy sitting at your desk, it was so weird to me to like even be in the same class as a guy, let alone him sitting right beside me and like we'd have to share worksheets and stuff. Like that's what makes you feel like you don't know how to interact with the opposite gender, and then that's where there's room for, you know,
especially
mistakes.
because like we live in Canada, like
Yeah.
we don't
No,
live
you
back
can't
home.
avoid it. Exactly. Like, I feel like there's like, I guess like a lot of sheltering where you're like sheltered so much from it that you just don't even know what to do.
Yeah.
I remember by like, we were separated for like a few years, right? And then grade 8, the guys started getting like really weird because they had no idea how to interact with girls, right?
Yeah.
To the point where like they'd wait outside our gym, right? And like try to open the door to get a glimpse of the girls inside, like playing sports or something, right? Because we'd obviously like change out of our abayas and stuff and change out of our hijabs. And so it's just like they treat us like we're some like odd specimen, right? Like it's completely off
Nothing
limits.
to know,
I know, it's like completely off limits. Like you can't interact with them, don't even think about them, right? So then guys would try to do anything they could.
Yeah.
Just to like kind of like get a little interaction.
Or even with girls, I feel like at that age is such a critical age, and like a lot of girls were very self-conscious, so to have no male validation at all, like girls in our school would leave the bathroom door open when they fixed their hijabs so that when guys walk by, they could look at them. Like they'd do that on purpose, you know?
God.
I know. They would do that on purpose just to get any tiny little bit of validation because there was no interactions whatsoever.
Especially with the, like if they had no like fatherhood.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how else.
Just trying to unpack deeply.
I don't know how else to put it, but like
Yeah.
if it was like girls who
Even
had
at home.
if it came from like home issues,
It got worse.
it
at
would
school,
definitely
yeah.
like it would definitely affect your way at school.
Yeah.
I feel like our Islamic school experience, like mine versus you guys, is so different.
Yeah, it was different, but the same in a way. Like, we kind of had the same issues, but different experiences. Like, I feel like your school was very anti-girl, anti-like learning,
I know, yeah.
anti-like
I don't know
development.
I don't know what was wrong
But
with our school. There
was
was
like,
so many.
Our school was like trying to teach it the Islamic way, but they missed. Like,
I guess
they
like,
tried, but they missed.
I guess it's also because our school, like, they had kind of like a program running prior to, right? But then like the first year that they opened this new school was when I got in, right? But it was also but it's also that they had a program running like back in Pakistan, right? Then they had a program running here, and they decided to expand, right? So that's kind of when I got into it. So maybe it was that they were still kind of like figuring out their path, but I still don't find that as an excuse.
I mean, I know of other Islamic schools, like my sister goes to one, where it has improved over the years, like in terms of like their strictness or their like implementation of Islam. My sister used to go to that same Islamic school, and when she used to go to the Islamic school, they weren't even allowed to wear perfume to school. And now my little sister goes there, and obviously things have changed. So I see that improvement in schools where they're getting a larger like audience, you know, their community is a lot more professional, and it's parents who actually care about their children and want them to learn Islam. It's way more professional than those tiny schools that like are just starting up and they have like 10 kids in their class and they're just like testing out this new program and whatever, you know, they're thinking of it as a business. It's way different, and that causes the different experiences, but we have like similar like culture that we could like bond
It's
over.
also like, I felt like, at least in my Islamic school, I don't know if you guys felt the same way, but I felt like the students weren't the priority.
Yeah.
It was just kind of like, it's just kind of, you get it running, right? You get the money in your pocket, the students get a mark, and that was it. It wasn't like the actual success of the development, or even like kind of building up these students into real functioning citizens of society.
Yeah, it was about reputation.
For our school, it was about name. Like, I think that's why they were so picky about dress codes and like everything, because they wanted the name of their school to seem professional. Like, even we would host the we had tournaments with every single school, like Islamic school in the area. So we would host the soccer tournament, and they would hire like these professional soccer players and stuff to train us, because they were embarrassed that we would lose the soccer tournament and we hosted the game. You know, like they just cared so much about their name and their reputation, and they would up the prices of fees and stuff for the school just to make it seem like this bougie private school that like was super professional, and like you would wear like matching, you know, uniforms, and everybody was in a single file line. Like, that's what they cared about more than they cared about like
the students like the student
Yeah.
learning how to play soccer.
Yeah.
Like they didn't care.
Would you say that you regret going to Islamic school? Like, yes or no? And like, why?
I think I would honestly no, because as much as like there were bad experiences, I learned from them, and because I have like alhamdulillah like a good information of Islam, and like my parents taught me well, and I could just go home and ask my mom what's right or wrong, and I could just depend on what she would to teach me. Like I think no, like I would say no to, like I don't regret it, only because like I have a better resource, a better source of like education right at home. And like Islamic, basically what I'm trying to say is that Islamic school is not the only thing that I can depend on. So just for the experience, because I did have bad experiences and I did have good, and I think the good of it cancels out the bad, to be honest, because the good was just so much, like you would never experience that in public school. So Islamic school was definitely like something you like, it's a once in a lifetime thing. It's just an experience that not everyone gets to experience.
I was gonna say, like, I don't regret it, and I think that I went to Islamic school at the perfect time, just because I was going through like too much identity crisis. So for everybody to kind of be the same in my class and like from the same culture, and like you see, like, me and Judy went to the exact same, we met in that class and we're still friends. Like, I created friendships and bonds with people that I would have never even thought to interact with, because when I went to public school, I wanted to be white. You know, like, I did not want to associate with being Muslim at all. So for me to have Muslim friends and to go to a community where it was all Muslims and, like, be comfortable with these people, and I made memories that, like, I'll never forget. And even the bad of the school, like, we bond over that and we laugh about it now and stuff. I feel like I don't regret going. It's just that there's so much to improve on. What about you?
I would say this is like a difficult question to answer, because I feel like I do regret going, but I feel like I went for a reason, and it kind of like made me who I am, right? As in like what I want to improve with myself and like with my kids, or like even future generations. But overall, like, if it was that I could erase that part and like not go completely, I think I would. Like, I think for the majority of it, I do regret it. I know that from my parents' end, like, they tried to do what was best for their kids, right? And I know, like, every time I got sent to the office, which I got sent to the office a lot, right? For, like, these smallest things, like, oh, you're putting on lip balm, go to the office. I remember one time, like, we finished a history test, right? And after you finish a test, you have that, like, relief in you, right? So I go, I submit my test, right? I give it to the teacher. I sit in my chair, and all I did was lean back, put my hands back, and, like, sigh, right? And the teacher gives me the nastiest look, and she's like, I see what you're doing, Khadija. What am I doing? I don't get it. Like, there's just so many things that, like, just, like, I feel like there's this constant, like, belittling from teachers. And I feel like teachers were always on this power trip to prove that they are, like, they're the teacher. They're the ones in control. I remember one time this teacher, me and this girl were laughing, right? I don't know why we just found everything so funny that day. And this teacher was like, you need to stop laughing, right? We just looked at her, right? But we're still kind of laughing. And she's like, if you don't stop laughing, then I'm gonna like call the principal. And we were still laughing. She's like, okay, you need to leave. And we're like, oh, we're not gonna leave. And she's like, okay, if you don't leave, I'm gonna leave. Why did she pick up her things and leave in the middle of class? We sat there for half the period, just like we just sat there laughing, right? Because like, what do we do now? Like, it's a class of like 25 students sat there with no teacher, right? You're leaving 13-year-olds alone like that, right? Like, obviously, like, it was just like things like that was like, I didn't even know what was going on at that point. Like, now I think about it, and it feels like a fever dream. And it was just like, it was just constant, like, belittling, right? Like, tell me I'm gonna fail. One time I finished, like, an Arabic worksheet because I didn't want to do it for homework. And the teacher, like, saw that I finished it and was like, oh, if you want to be... She says it to the whole class. She's like, oh, if you want to be so smart, if you want to pretend to be so smart like Khadija here when you're actually not, then you can try to go and finish it without listening to the instructions, right? And it's just, like, this constant... I feel like it was a constant power trip, and it just completely ruined my confidence to the point when I got to high school, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who I was, and it was like this whole, I had to rebuild who I was because I didn't know.
I feel like even with the comfort thing, like, unprofessionalism definitely went both ways because we were not the best students, and that was because we were in an like unprofessional setting. So we would treat teachers the way we would treat like family members, and we would joke around and like disrespect them also, but that was because of the way that they treated us. Even with like supply teachers, I remember we had so many supply teachers just walk out of our class, or like,
I know, yeah. Same.
We had one teacher who would throw markers around the class if we didn't listen.
Oh my god.
But that was because we didn't listen. Like, we definitely made her feel
that's the thing.
disrespected.
I feel like they
We've
disciplined
made teachers
us.
cry before.
Yeah, we've made
same.
teachers cry. We've made them like take away our recesses for like weeks on end.
I feel like they discipline us like they're children.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they just felt like we weren't students, that we were their children,
Yeah.
right? Like, I know teachers would get involved in our friendship drama.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why this was a thing, but if some girl did something to me that I didn't like, I would not talk to her, right? Like, but it's obviously difficult because there's like 10 people to talk to, right? So I just would not talk to her. And then for some reason, like, all my friends would also not talk to her. So this girl would just kind of like be singled
alone,
out.
yeah.
And then the teacher would come to me like, Khadija, you need to stop telling people what to do. And I would not tell anyone to, like, not talk to this girl, right? Because I didn't care. Like, it's just me and you, like, we don't get along. But it was just, like, why does the teacher come to me and like, get involved?
Yeah.
There's no, like, I guess, mediating. It's like, you're my child, and I'm going to tell you how to behave.
And they've said that to us multiple times, like, I think of you as my child, but you shouldn't. Like,
Exactly.
Like, I get it.
You're not my
you're supposed
mother.
to care. Like, our first immigrant parents, they're somebody parents, you know? Like, these teachers are all parents, so I get it. Like, they just think that, oh, you're like my child, like, I'm trying to teach you and stuff, but it's just not the right way, and it's not your job also. Like,
I think the culture also brings that out.
Yeah, it
like,
does.
I know if someone said that to me, like, now, and, like, one of my teachers like, oh, I see you as my child, like, I'd be so weirded out.
Yeah.
I'd be like, don't say that to me. You're not my dad. You're not my mom. Like, don't say that to me.
Mm-hmm. So how do you guys think that, like, you could improve at Islamic schools, or, like, improve your experience at an Islamic school?
I feel like one of the ways definitely to improve is funding, but that's also, like, as you said before, it's a systemic issue, right? Like,
it's not really like the thing to blame.
Yeah, like, we can't blame Islamic schools for that, because, like, Catholic schools, right?
They literally get funded.
They get, and I'm pretty sure they get more, because they get it from the church, and they also get it from the government, right? Whereas Islamic schools don't get that.
Yeah.
So once we, like, kind of figure out the funding issue and all that, because you can only expect, like, Muslim parents who are also working class or even lower to pay so much.
Yeah.
Because the fees are already so high, right? Where you're paying, like, I know we paid, it was like $550, right? But it was, since it was me and my sister both, it was $500 per student, right? So it'd be $1,000 each, like $1,000 total. But then if you up it more to try and get, like, a better building, more resources, then how much are you expecting us to pay per month?
Yeah, and then you're also having less students. Like, I bet there would be so many more kids at Islamic schools if it wasn't that expensive, you know? Even us, we had to pay, like, $500, $550 for...
There's, like, that accessibility issue.
Yeah.
The main reason my parents took me out was because they just couldn't handle the amount anymore. Especially because I didn't only have to pay for the fees that everyone else had to pay for. I had to pay for commuting because I lived really far. Like, in my area didn't have much Islamic schools, so I had to travel literally every morning and after school.
And then, like, pick and drop and stuff, like, getting someone to pay for that. And then school excursions, like, if you wanted to be on a soccer team or a basketball team, like, you had to pay more, right?
Uniforms.
And then I felt
we need to pay for uniforms.
And then I felt bad asking my parents to do anything that was outside of school or not school related, because I knew that they would have to pay more.
Yeah. Even field trips, everything. You had to pay for everything.
Oh, our field trips were covered. Like, our field trips are included in our fees.
No, like, if we wanted to go to Wonderland, we had to pay. If we had, like, a lunch, like, plan, you had to pay, like, every, you know? Obviously, you had to pay, but nothing was included in the tuition. Like, I think that was just the entry fee, you know, for you to enter the school. Like, uniforms was not covered by the $500 we were paying. Or anything else that we did at school. So you're paying $500 just to be in the school, you know? I think I would just, like you said, the funding, like, that's just the biggest issue. But also just teachers. Teachers need to improve. Just more professional teachers, more teachers that, like, actually went to school for teaching, actually like teaching. Not just hiring family members, because they're your family members at the school, and like we had so many family members working at the school. Like you guys are you just hired them because that's your cousin or your sister.
You know the funny thing, like when we were, the school first opened up, right, and we had to go do an entry exam to pretend like they were professional, you know. I literally, like, the entry exam did nothing, because I remember there's like some girl who was in my same grade, and she could not do anything that was like a regular grade level. And I was like, I don't know how you pass the entry exam, but okay. But anyways, right, like, my mom applied to be a teacher there, right, and my mom has, like, done school, she's, like, finished out, she had experience in the actual, like, school system, right, like, the, school district, and they didn't accept her, but they accepted, like, fresh immigrants, like, fresh off the boat, like, they just got here. And it's just like, how do you make that choice? Yeah. I feel like that definitely could have improved the experience.
It was such a pick and choose thing. Like, they would not. I don't know.
It's all based on connections.
Yeah.
It's not actually based on, like, credentials or experience. It's all based on connections.
Or culture.
That's
like,
true,
I'm just gonna hire you because you're from the same background as me. Like, what? How does that, like, you know?
Help a sister
How
out,
does
but
that help?
Not really.
It really doesn't. How would you improve it?
I think, like, it does go down the whole professional, like the whole professional category. It like, if you were to break it down, it wouldn't just be teachers and principals. It would also be students, because if students weren't as professional, like if they didn't all work together to, like, build a school, then, like, again, like, the outcome would be bad. Like, for example, students also have to work with teachers to be professional. Like, just because, like, if, like, for example, like, I know the student who, like, it wasn't just, like, I know there's other ones, but this was the one, like, I was aware of, who, like, had always been in that same Islamic school since forever. So they just have, like this whole thing where, like, oh, I run this place, like I've been here.
I guess, so, like, a lack of discipline.
Yeah, right? like I've been here, so I know everything. I know everyone. Like, I don't have to listen. I don't have to listen to you if I don't want to. Yeah. Just because
they
had
authority.
Yeah, just because they had authority, just because they were just so comfortable, and it's just. And
even like, kids whose parents would make donations at the school, like, they also had that, like, that hierarchy where they'd be like, oh, I kind of run what I like the school, like, I kind of, you know, or even if, like, students had their moms were teachers at the school or something, like, they had that type of hierarchy. I could go in the staff room.
Yeah, there was a hidden hierarchy that, like, you had to, like, it was very, like, not, like, invisible, but you had to, like, look closely to see it. But once you identify it, it's so, like, prominent.
Because they wouldn't pay for anything. You could go into the staff room whenever you'd like.
Same for students who had their, like, parents as teachers.
Yeah, exactly.
And you could get out of anything easy.
Yeah.
Or I had my mom as the teacher there, but for some reason
So you're the hierarchy we're talking about.
No, for some reason my experience was worse. Like, my mom being at the school, I was always scared to do something because I was afraid they could just, like, call my mom and tell her right then and there that I was doing something bad. And also I felt like for me to be like the student, like, my mom being a teacher, I had to be better. Like, I had to perform better, and especially in her class I had to do better because, like, I was her daughter, you know? So I feel like I had the worst end of it. My mom would not let me go into the staff room, and my mom would not let me, like, stay after school, like, pressure, and stuff.
That's just your mom.
She was actually like, no, like, students are not allowed in here. You can't just get this because you're my daughter. But there would be other kids that, like, got to do whatever they want just because their mom or dad was in the school.
True. I feel like another way I'd improve it is by, I guess, kind of, like, improving the education, right, along with the teachers and, like, what they're teaching. Like, I know teachers just give us, like, a workbook, and that would be it. Like, you had to finish the workbook and then, like, hand it in by a certain day. The next day you'd have a test, and that was it. Like, there's no actual there's no actual teaching. Right? And then also kind of, like, fostering an environment where children can ask questions. Because I feel like that's a lot of how we learn. I know that there was not much of a way for me to ask questions, especially in my Islamic school, because it was like, if you had a question, and, like, just for example, there'd be one question, right? Like, we were in grade 8 and we were asking, like, is it okay to be friends with a guy? Right? Like, you know your intentions, the guy, like, you know the guy's intentions. Like, is it okay to be friends? And it's like, no. But it's like, why? And they'd be like, no, because it's just not good.
Yeah.
There's, like, no actual education, so it's like, why did I even ask the question? Yeah. Because then you leave even more
and because
confused.
They said no that way, there are students, like, that
want to.
That would want to even more now, to rebel against that teacher.
Because that's what teenagers do.
To rebel against that rule.
Exactly. That's what teenagers do. Teenagers rebel. And when you're telling them just no, without any sort of understanding, that's all the teenager wants to go and do.
Because, like, even though we're teenagers and we consider ourselves grown or whatever, we're still young. So whatever they say to us has a huge effect on us. Like, did I talk about how the teacher, like that one teacher that helped me with my hijab, that had such a big effect on me. Same thing for anything that any teacher could have done to any student. Like that teacher saying no to the student.
Negative for positive.
Like, it's just, like, that's why it goes down under the professional category, because if the teacher, you have to be so, like, cautious with the way you speak to students.
Because it's like parenting.
I feel like it needs to be, like, again with, like, parenting, like that nurturing environment, you know, where you nurture their, like, learning and their development to kind of let them grow into, like, self-standing individuals.
Plus, like, me and you, literally, like, all of us three, we went, like, to Islamic school in, like, during our puberty stage.
During, like, key years.
Like, those years matter so much, because, like, the way you were, whatever you were taught at the time, or whatever, like, experiences you had, they matter so much to you in, like, in the future and ongoing. And, like, that's why sex ed, like, it shouldn't have been so, like, what did you say? Hush, hush, hush.
I think that's just how they talk about it. Like, it's very, like, even physically, when they start talking about it, they'd, like, lower their tones and stuff.
They would cover the window.
I remember one time when they were talking about, like, puberty, right?
Yeah.
And we were in grade 8 at this point, right? So a majority of us had gone through it, and it was, like, they combined the grade 7 and 8 class, and they, like, brought hot chocolate and biscuits, right? Like, it's gonna be ladies' time, and then but as soon as you ask a question, they would not answer it. So it's like, why are you doing all of that to literally, like, miss the target?
We had a worksheet in grade 6. Like, the guys would get their puberty class in the gym, and we'd get ours in our classroom, just to separate, because it's 2 different types of puberty, you know? And so when we got, like, a worksheet at that time, and after the class ended and the boys were supposed to come back into the class, the teacher was like, I'm gonna watch you all put the paper in your bag, because I can't have any boys in the class see it.
I remember that. We also had something like that.
What the hell? Like, it literally was a paper that said, if you're on your period, you could have chocolate, you have to do this, you have to do that. Like, it was just like a basic paper with information, and they were like, put it in your bag, like, no boy can see that. That is so embarrassing. Like, blah, blah, blah. Or even when we were on our periods in school, you would not pray, but, like, the school would pray collectively. You had to, like, go through the back and, like, sit in the back in a private way so that no guy knew that you weren't praying. Like, it was so embarrassing for you to not be praying, and no guy could understand. And I bet, like, obviously us, like, with our lack of knowledge on it, I bet guys also have a lack of knowledge on periods and stuff, because they were also, like, kept away from, like, they were like, you don't need to know about this stuff, you don't need to know about what girls do, and da-da-da, but, like, they do need to know, because like, these are also brothers, these are also gonna be fathers one day, like,
even with separating girls and boys when you talk about periods, or, like, puberty in general, I think there should be, like, okay, separate them just for comfort, right, and so that there's, like, kind of, like, a safe space, but then like, educate them about both. About both sides. Because it's crucial. Like, that you need to know that. Based on, like, what we've talked about so far, would you think that you'd send your child to Islamic school? Either in the future or in the current state of Islamic schools as they are right now, in our area at least.
I think I would, just because of the state of public schools. Like, they are running an agenda that I do not stand with at all. They're teaching kids things that I don't want my kids to know. And also, I learned a lot about, like, racism and me being different in public schools, and I never want my kid to feel like they are different, or like they don't belong, or like the white culture is the culture that you know, you need to indulge in to be popular and pretty. So I think I would send my kid to Islamic school, but I would be very, like, picky on which Islamic school, even if I'd have to pay a lot for it. It's just that right now, our school systems in Canada are absolutely screwed, and they are just, like, it's not a spot for Muslim kids to be in.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say, Judy?
I think I would. But, like, I don't know. To be honest, it's a big decision. And, like, if, inshallah, like, once I have my own kids, I wouldn't make the decision on my own. Like, I'd also want to, like, know what my husband would have to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've had my own experiences. And, I don't know, like, if I knew that my kid would experience the same thing I experienced, it wasn't horrible, so I definitely, like, would be like, sure, like, whatever.
But, a little
like,
bit of toughness is not the issue.
Like,
character development.
Exactly, like, nothing's gonna happen, like, man up. But, I don't know, like, it has such a deep, like, meaning to it to be in Islamic school. Like, it's not just a school. It's not, like, you could see how, like, long this podcast is. Like, we have a lot more to talk about.
Guys.
Like, we actually cut it short.
This is literally a minimized version.
Yeah, like,
babe, we summarized it. This is summary. But yeah, like, Islamic school is such a big thing for us. So I don't know. Like, I definitely would just for the experience, but it wouldn't be for as long as I went. Like, it'd probably just be for a year or two. Actually, I went for only 2 years.
Yeah.
But, like, I'm not sure if I would send them to during middle school, because, like, high school is not, like, I don't want them to go during high school, but I also don't want them to go, I'm not sure if I want them to go during middle school, because of, like, if it was a girl and she had to go through middle school in Islamic school where they taught them about period in a shameful way, the period, like, or menstruation in a shameful way, and, like, they'd have to be embarrassed about it. I have the confidence to send my kid to my kid to Islamic school, and, like them coming home to me and, like, asking me questions, and, like, I have the confidence to tell them what is right or what is wrong, and what's the difference between what they're teaching and what I would want them to learn. But I'm not sure if I want them to, you know, just, like, have that kind of implementation and, like, you know, like, depend.
Yeah, that shame.
Yeah.
I kind of agree with you with, like, the years that you send them. I feel like middle school is a very tricky time to kind of, like, send your child into an environment like that. But if it was, like, talking about the future, I feel like Islamic schools will improve.
Yeah.
I definitely would not send them to the one I went to. Like, I know there are, like, a few better ones in our area that are implementing, like, the board that runs it is kind of, like, made up of people who, like, grew up here or, like, are younger, right? So they're able to, like, kind of connect more with the younger generations. Maybe I would send them to something like that, but I definitely would not send them to ones that we went to.
Where they're, like, running a trial
I
program
know.
on us.
It's literally this studying. That's someone's thesis right there. That's literally someone's PhD program right there. I would not send them to one like that, but I also feel like maybe I'd send them when they're younger, but there's also, like, that home and school balance, right? Where I want to create that environment at home, right? Where they have that education and stuff, that, like Islam is a lifestyle, right? I want them to kind of adopt that first before they go into an environment like that, if I even send them there. But it's also, like, I'm not 100% for public school because, as I said, public school right now is a scary place to be.
And it's only getting worse. Like,
social media.
Yeah, we went at a time where it's, like, starting to change. So we were kind of just, like, in and out. Now we're in, like, just going to uni, but me and Judy are in uni, so we don't have the same environment. But I know and see what high school kids are being taught and what high school kids are going through, and I'm totally against it. And if that was my last option, I would pick up my kids and leave Canada. Like, I would not. I feel like,
especially with, like, during, like, middle school and, like, their younger years, they're very impressionable, right? So when you build that strong foundation at home, right, or even, like, if you send them to a good Islamic school, and then you build that good, like, foundation, then when they go into high school, then they're not as bad.
Yeah, they won't want to rebel.
Yeah. I feel like it's like a very deep balance, but again, it's like different for everyone. It's very subjective.
Yeah.
Like even like from just our experiences, like
Yeah,
we had very different
experiences.
experiences.
We also had a lot in common, and it was the same things that we had in common. So that like,
there's a lot of overlap.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this movie.
If you guys made it all the way through, congratulations.
And should we say Assalamu alaikum like the song school way?
Oh yeah.
Assalamu
alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I'm getting shivers down my spine right now.
Bye guys.
Inshallah for next week, guys.
Thank you guys.
Waalaikumsalam.